the bone, the skin. I mean, it doesn't matter your age. We take it for granted that the skin will heal.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, we bring about a very exciting technology. Every now and then there is some new technology, some new idea or thought that transforms the way medicine is practiced or how business is done. And I'm going to share with you basically what's happening now in the regenerative medicine space. There is a regenerative medicine clinical trial happening this year that could completely change heart disease as we know it for everybody. And if this trial proves to be effective, what will happen is regenerative therapies will have an engine to be able to take into other disease processes in the health and performance space. So you want to listen to this podcast with the lens of what is regenerative therapy and how could this technology, and it's not really new because regenerative medicine lives within us. You know, when we cut ourselves with a wound, when we have a little injury, our body already has the machinery to heal. But how do we tap into that power, that regenerative power for us to heal and direct that into disease states or direct that into our performance? All this and more on today's podcast. If you're new to the podcast, welcome in. This is the Thrive State Podcast, where I bring in thought leaders to talk about the new and latest technology, the mindset, the habits to be able to access optimal health, longevity, peak performance. For people who are returning to the podcast, thank you for being a loyal part of the community. I hope this podcast has given you and your family and your loved ones the knowledge, the tools, and the inspiration, the hope to live our best life. If this podcast has given you that value, consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are being heard. Subscribe, comment down in the section below so that there is engagement to be able to bring this message to more people just like you. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book at thrivestatebook.com. And it really goes over all the new technologies and the habits and the traits you need for optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. Today's guest is Dr. Timothy Nelson. I actually met him at Abundance 360, which is actually an Exponential Technologies conference that is put on by Peter Diamandis. Dr. Nelson is actually a physician scientist trained in medicine and cardiac developmental biology, and he is actually driven for innovation with the technology and goal of new product development. Now, congenital heart disease is actually a condition that affects 1 in 100 people. It is also a condition that provides the optimal mix of challenges and opportunities to allow cross-functional teams to succeed and grow in a whole new industry. Today, we talk about regenerative medicine, and in particular, a new clinical trial that actually uses regenerative medicine. Get this, they actually take samples of your skin, convert them into stem cells, turn them into heart cells to treat heart disease. That's right, the number one killer of all Americans and the number one killer of all people across the world is heart disease. How do you use it in that population, and how do you use it in the congenital heart disease population? This clinical trial could be a blockbuster for medicine in general, as it's able to tap into the regenerative powers of human beings leveraged to treat disease. On this podcast, you'll learn more about regenerative medicine, more about this clinical trial, and then how you can participate in a virtual dinner where we cook our own food and find out more about the exciting power of regenerative medicine and everything that Dr. Nelson is doing in the regenerative heart space. So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this conversation with Dr. Timothy Nelson. Dr. Timothy Nelson, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast.
Awesome to be here.
I am super excited to dive into this conversation. We met actually at Abundance 360 when I was a lead doc for the Fountain Life group at the conference. And when we had an opportunity to meet, I was really excited about the future of where we can go with regenerative medicine and cellular therapies. And I know you do work in the congenital heart space. So I'm really, really excited to dive in deep into that science with you. But before we get into there, people in my audience are really excited to know a little bit more about the quirks of Dr. Tim in a game show segment of the show we call The Five to Thrive. 5 quick questions to be answered in less than 30 seconds, 1,000 points each. And if you win the Five to Thrive, you get a nice farm to table meal on me the next time we meet. So my question to you, Dr. Nelson, is, are you ready to play the Five to Thrive?
Can't wait. Let's do this.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. At a cocktail dinner, what topic can you go on for hours and hours and hours talking about?
You know, I love stem cells, regenerative medicine, and how that's going to transform the future and what does it take to get there. I guess I'm a techno geek that loves to talk about the day job, and it's hard to separate my work from my personal life, I guess.
Sounds great. 1,000 points there. Question number 2 was, what was your favorite childhood memory?
Childhood memory, water skiing. I loved being on the lake. I loved being with my family on 4th of July and all the Canadian fishing trips. And so lake life and family are definitely the best memories of my childhood.
Oh, beautiful. Question number 3 was, you are trapped in an elevator for 24 hours and you have one wish to be able to bring anything from the outside world you desire. What is that one thing you're going to be wishing for?
Ooh, one thing, I'm trapped in an elevator to bring in. Um, Definitely good food, drink, and a meal would definitely be top priority. Not only for survival, but that would be the thing that would be top of mind, no doubt.
Okay, sounds good. I'm really excited to hear your answer to this question. Is, I am giving you a microphone to step on stage to sing a karaoke song to a crowd of 10,000 people. What song would you pick?
Oh man, you got some tough questions. Probably Bad to the Bone.
Bad to the bone, bad. 4,000 points now. Will he win the Five to Thrive? Question number 5 is, how does Dr. Tim Nelson want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a selfless leader that committed his career to the cure of congenital heart disease and was able to bring together a group, a community that really was able to do the impossible and live beyond what traditional medicine has taught us as being feasible and go well beyond that in a future state. So that's the team I dream to be part of.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, 5,000 points, which means that I will be bringing you dinner, hopefully not while you being trapped in an elevator for 24 hours. But I can't wait to dive into that mission a little bit more. You are an MD, PhD. What has brought your particular interest in congenital heart disease? Were you ever in clinical medicine initially, or was science always something that you wanted to bring from the benchtop, into clinics?
You know, I fell in love with research in college doing organic chemistry, and I had a stepfather that was a physician, and I was told you can't do medicine and science both because they're both a full-time job. And so I went to medical school planning on being a cardiothoracic surgeon. And during medical school, I got into the MD PhD program because I really loved what we didn't know and what the possibilities of science were, and stem cells and Jamie Thompson's discovery of human embryonic stem cells was in those formative years for me. And along my clinical path, there has been moments where I can recall the joys and frustration of medicine drove me to really be keenly focused on how to apply new science to create a better future state. That medicine is really quite barbaric as we practice it today. And it takes a dedicated team of people to change current clinical practice. And so along my clinical journey, I've prioritized research, product development, clinical trials, to the point now where we are in a remarkable place to be able to really fundamentally change the way congenital heart disease is treated. So I am a scientific physician is the way I describe myself today.
Well, I'm so glad there are people like you that really allow the clinicians of the future to be able to use these technologies to really, not only extend our life, but to bring in more life and more quality of life, and enjoy the time that we're here as well. Now, before I dive into the regenerative medicine, was there anything in particular about the heart or that brought you into congenital heart disease? I mean, it's certainly very humbling to know that the statistics are that 1 in 100 people are actually born with some sort of congenital heart defect. But was there a personal story? I knew you wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, leaving medical school, but what brought your interest into the cardiac space, particularly congenital heart disease, as a topic to focus on?
Yeah, maybe it was just kind of my rural heritage, farm boy, where I came from. Plumbing was pretty simple to understand, right? And the idea that the heart's at the heart of the matter, and it's really such a simplistic organ. It just is a pump. It's a transfer pump. It takes fluid from one spot and pushes it at a higher pressure to another spot, and probably just the simplicity of that was the draw for me, and the idea that as a surgeon you can cut it open, you can put it together, you can make it better. It's tangible to me. You can understand it. That's probably what drove me into it, and then to realize through developmental biology of how it forms embryologically, just really inspired me that we can do far better than a scalpel. There's new tools that can repair the heart, and so I just have always been enamored with the heart, I guess, from simplistic reasons, and now I've fallen in love with the complexities of it.
Yeah, and let's dive a little bit more into really the heart of this podcast, which is regenerative therapies. A lot of my listeners already know a little bit about regenerative therapies, ranging from growth factors and platelet-rich plasma to cellular therapy, and then vesicular therapy, such as things in exosomes, to cellular therapies, as we know, with different types of stem cells and things of that nature. We've also know that within clinical practice now, cellular therapies are somewhat of the Wild West, people using all different sorts of products, some with some bad outcomes in the past. Where are we with regenerative therapies these days? Well, let's preface that question with when did you initially found love for regenerative therapies, and where are we now in terms of what therapies are safe to be using in the future?
Look, regenerative therapy started, I think, in bone marrow transplant, right? I mean, this idea that if a patient could have a blood cancer, we could irradiate them, we give them chemotherapies, we wipe out their immune system, their hematopoietic blood cells, and then reconstitute it with a bone marrow transplant and give it somebody else's stem cells is a miracle of medicine, right? And we take it for granted now. Most large institutions, hospitals will do this, and we have remarkable outcomes. And now the evolution of CAR T therapy has just taken that to a whole new personalized level. So regenerative medicine is not new. It's been going on for decades. The beauty of it is it's so pleiotropic, and there's so many opportunities to leverage cell-based therapies to make small and large parts of our health better. And there's clearly going to be debate. There's clearly going to be innovation that works, that doesn't work. But the field is so wide open, and I think there's been some dramatic successes in the last couple of years, specifically with CAR T therapy, that really is proving that this is a field that is on the cusp of continued growth and continued remarkable miracle outcomes.
Yeah, so let's break it down to somebody who's just hearing about regenerative medicine in general. Um, really what it is our body intrinsically has the mechanisms for repair and healing, and it's really tapping into the power of that and using it in different applications of health and disease. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to me when we do cardiac surgery on an 80-year-old, right? We cut their skin open, we cut their sternum open, we repair their heart, and then we put wires through their chest, sew it back together, and by God, it heals together, right? I mean, you'll have a scar, but the bone, the skin, I mean, it doesn't matter your age. We take it for granted that the skin will heal. It may heal more slowly in an adult than a child or an infant, but it heals. Another way that people don't generally think about this is um, in the Cold War era, in the 60s and 70s, where we did above ground nuclear testing, carbon-14 levels went higher in the atmosphere than have ever been recorded in history. And just the way we carbon date dinosaurs, we can use that technology to date how old your tissues are. So I'll spare you the hour lecture that I give in medical school and give you the punchline that if we ground your body up and we measured how old your physical body is from brain to tissue, everything, we estimate, for the record, nobody's ever done that experiment, but based on what we know with the experiments that have been done, it's the best estimate that your body, no matter what your age is, whether you're 10 years old or you're 100 years old, you're 120 years old, the average age of the cells in your body is 7 to 10 years. So think about that. I mean, think about a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 70-year-old. Their body, on average, is made up of cells that were born within the last 7 to 10 years. So, for instance, your red blood cells in your body, we all know, turn over every 3 months. That's why we do a hemoglobin A1C for diabetic patients, is those cells only live for 3 months. Every 3 months, your red blood cells, every single one of them in your body is regenerated. There's other cells like your eye or the oocytes of a female body that you're born with, that you never regenerate. And so there's a spectrum of cells that are turned over almost daily to cells that are never turned over. But you average all of that together, your body is about 7 to 10 years old. So regenerative medicine is happening every hour, every day, every week, and to a degree that we don't even fully comprehend. So therefore, the drugs we take, the exercise we do, the food we take, how does that affect our regenerative ability is probably going to have the biggest outcome or biggest impact on how we age, how we recover, and how we grow. So these are areas of medicine that we weren't taught in medical school, but as the science evolves, we realize how important it is to preserve, protect, and promote the regenerative capacity of our body. And that unlocks the miracle of medicine in the future.
Wow, super powerful. And I want to kind of dive a little bit into the work that you are doing specifically now. What type of cellular therapies are you currently using? And how are you using that in terms of the growth and the healing for congenital heart disease?
So one of those tissues in our body that does not regenerate very well is actually the heart muscle. So the heart muscle is estimated to regenerate about 1% a year. So over the 50 years of a 50-year-old, maybe half of the heart muscle could be replaced after birth. But if you have a heart attack or if you have congenital heart disease, that 1% growth rate of the heart muscle itself is inadequate to repair damage or missing parts. And so that's why we were taught in medical school that the heart doesn't regenerate, which is, from a practical standpoint, still correct. From a scientific perspective, it's not correct that there is some regeneration. So recognizing that, we're trying to find fertilizers and seeds that we can stimulate the heart to maybe be 2%, 3% regenerative capacity. And there may be technologies and drugs that could be leveraged to do that. But really, the fundamental game changer that we are the world's first in being able to offer now is the ability to bioengineer new seeds that can grow new heart muscle. And so we at HeartWorks have gotten FDA permission to launch the world's first clinical trial using autologous heart muscle. And autologous means that it's genetically identical to you. So the long and short of this is we take a skin biopsy from a patient, we convert it into induced pluripotent stem cells in the lab. We train those stem cells to become beating, contracting heart muscle cells. And we have done that in a clinical grade way that's sufficient to do the world's first clinical trial. And those trials will be starting in the next year. We don't have the exact date, but we have the permission. And we're in the final stages of being able to begin testing autologous heart muscle that's made in the lab to repair and replace damaged heart tissue of adults with congenital heart disease. So imagine being able to create the master stem cell that can give rise to any cell type, and we just happen to convert it into heart muscle. We now are testing that, or preparing ourselves to test that in clinical trials in the coming months. That's a game changer, and being the first in the world is exciting. It's also nerve-wracking, but we have a lot as a community that we're going to learn from this, and there's no doubt in my mind, I believe that this technology has the ability to cure many diseases, including heart disease.
Oh, that's amazing. You bring up sort of a distinction that other people I know are curious about. There is thoughts of autologous versus cells that don't contain the same genetic information from you. And there's certainly products that are out in the regenerative medicine space that are from either periplacental tissues and things like that are out there. Is, in your mind, is there a difference between using cells with your genetic material versus not? And currently, what are the legal considerations for using these type of therapies?
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to our cells, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive State is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I must say it's an important conversation to have. There's not a simple answer, but I'll give you my perspective is what you asked me to do. I would say because the economics of producing autologous tissue, in other words, one product for one patient, most people will argue that it's not feasible, it's not practical, and it's not sustainable. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that we can manufacture autologous tissue, one product for one patient. An example of that may be bone marrow transplants, which we have done for decades.
Yeah.
So you can do it. That doesn't mean it's not expensive and it's not the right thing for everybody. But when there's tissues like the heart, where you are wanting to remuscularize the heart at a massive level and have a quarter, a half of the heart muscle to be replaced with the products we make in the lab, if you do that with an allogeneic or somebody else's cells, you're going to have to take immunosuppression drugs to prevent the body from rejecting it. That's the facts. There's some cell types that are immunoprivileged, but there's never been a cardiac muscle cell that's immunoprivileged. So if you are actually remuscularizing with cardiac cells and you put it into a foreign body, that foreign body is going to reject it. So now you have the conundrum. Do you want somebody else's cells and immunosuppression drugs? Or do you want your own cells and avoid immunosuppression drugs? And I believe that we're proving in our work that you can scale the manufacturing. You can imagine a price point where this is feasible for the masses, not just the few. And if you can eliminate immunosuppression drugs, you eliminate the problem of transplant. That said differently, you may know this, that when you get a transplant in allogeneic tissue, such as the heart, and take immunosuppression drugs, you really are trading one disease for another. And if you live long enough with that transplanted heart, you'll likely develop some form of malignancy or cancer because the immune system gets knocked down. So we believe it's just a much healthier, ideal way of doing it. But the challenge that we're set on the mission to prove is, can you produce one product for one patient in a cost-effective way and make that available to everybody? I believe we will be able to do that.
I think that statement is not only hopeful, but if we look at history, that's where things have gone. And we looked at how long it took to sequence the human genome and the cost it took to sequence the human genome 20 years ago versus what it is today. It's rapidly different. And I think, when you are in the exponential growth phase of any technology, you're going to be able to produce it a lot faster and more economical for everybody. So I do think that what you state is true. Some people, talk to me about certain regenerative technologies. You're good friends with Peter Diamandis. He co-wrote the book Life Force with Tony Robbins. In the book, he talked about how he injured his shoulder and went to Panama and received some stem cells IV, and how it actually completely healed his shoulder conditions. What do you think of those applications of receiving cells that aren't yours, probably through an IV source, and their ability to heal in that way? And do you know where we are in the States to be able to bring these culture expanded cells to use?
Yeah. So I'll get to the regulatory environment from my standpoint here. I'll start by saying, when you recognize, as we talked about, that the body regenerates, the forces that prevent the body from regenerating are largely inflammatory conditions, right? So the forces the counter force of regeneration is inflammation. And some have said, and I tend to like this analogy, that cancer is the wound that never heals, right? So in other words, if the wound never heals, you create an inflammatory environment, the chronic inflammation that leads to cancer. So if you can nudge the body to be anti-inflammatory with cell-based therapies, whether it's an IV or a local injection, you can probably stimulate the body's own ability to regenerate more effectively. And we all do it in all tissues for the most part. So some of these systemic treatments like IV infusions are probably having an effect on some people that have a high inflammation state that are preventing the wound, if you will, the shoulder injury from healing naturally on its own. So there's no doubt in my mind that there's some dramatic examples of success. It's also true that one therapy isn't a perfect fit for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So this is where the field is figuring out what is safe, what is effective, and should we use autologous, allogeneic? All of these things are critical questions, but there's no doubt that there's benefit. Now you get to the regulatory environment, what's allowed in the U.S., what's not. Here's my simplistic explanation for that. In the United States, when there's a drug or a product that's not approved by the FDA, you test it in clinical trials, and you have what's called an IND, an investigational new drug application. We have 4 of them in our program. That gives us permission to test products that are not approved and to begin collecting the data if they're safe and effective. When you do that under FDA guidance and IRB regulations in the United States, we have rules and regulations that prevent the patient, the research subject, from paying out of their own pocket to be part of that research. Now, there's some clauses there. I know we can debate some of the humanitarian use clauses, but in general, accept the notion that we don't allow people to pay out of pocket to be an experimental research subject. And that's for obvious reasons, to protect people and protect society of high risk products that are not fully approved. That is the rules of the United States that we have in place through all of our regulatory bodies. Those rules are not necessarily the same rules that are in other countries. And so in other countries, you can use experimental products that are not approved, that are still in clinical testing phases, and patients themselves can pay to play, if you will, pay to be in that research study. And it can be an IRB, it can have the same oversight, but if you boil it down, that's the fundamental difference, as I see it, is what's different between the US and other countries. And that's what allows or encourages or promotes, whatever word you want to use, some individuals to go to other countries to get quote unquote unproven experimental drugs. We do that in the United States. We do that in our program with oversight of the FDA. We just don't allow the patient to pay for it. We have to find funding sources that pay for it independent of the individual. And I think that's a massive area of confusion for people in the United States, that we don't prevent people from being part of experimental studies. We prevent people from paying to be part of experimental studies. And that's the fundamental difference when it comes down to it.
Which is what is so important with the work that you are doing now, with being really the first ever cellular therapies to be able to for studies here in the States. And it does need funding. And so can you tell us a little bit about the fundraiser, virtual fundraiser you guys are having in February 23rd, and how others can contribute to really breakthrough science, first of its kind, to be able to heal a huge incidence. As we know, heart disease is really the #1 killer all across the world, not only the United States, but potentially a game changer to bring into other disease states.
Yeah. So the cost of this is obviously important. So for this world's first clinical trial where we manufacture your beating heart muscle and use it to deliver back into your body, the cost of that for our reagents is about $100,000. We can produce that product for this clinical trial for about $100,000 per patient. That's a lot of money. We do not ask the patient to contribute to that, as we just talked about. And so HeartWorks is a nonprofit that was growing across a consortium of 11 hospitals. I'm a physician at Mayo Clinic. I'm still at Mayo Clinic, and Mayo was the founding center of this structure. And Mayo and the 10 other hospitals work collaboratively to be able to execute on these clinical trials. And HeartWorks is an independent nonprofit that works across institutions. And so HeartWorks is responsible as sponsor of this study to raise the money for, $100,000 per person that we treat in this first clinical trial to prove that it's safe and hopefully that it's effective and move forward. So we believe we'll have to manufacture over the course of about 4 years, 50 patients to treat 9 of them. Mm-hmm. And so our first year, we're trying to manufacture 5 patients and start the treatment. And so we're on a mission to raise $100,000 per patient to do this clinical trial. And so one way we're doing that is on February 23rd, we have an amazing event. I welcome you and all of your listeners to join us. You go to webuildhearts.org, webuildhearts.org, and you can, at the top of the page, register for our event. And the dinner is, we expect to have over 1,000 people that are connected by Zoom. And it's super fun. What we do is we send you a HelloFresh style meal kit to your home. You'll get a box before the event. You'll get a box, you'll get a bottle of wine sent to you if you want that as well. And on the night of the 23rd, we will go through the cooking together. We have a celebrity chef, John, that will cook a healthy meal of salmon from Superior Fresh, Atlantic farm-raised salmon, which is great heart-healthy food, right? And we'll cook the meal together. We'll eat the meal together, and we'll have the ability to share our milestones, what we've done, what we're planning on doing going forward. So it's such a great way to get families, benefactors, scientists, physicians, investors, everybody into the same room, because we're doing it from your kitchen. And we did it last year, and we had so much fun. So you can only imagine the surprises that we're going to bring to the table today or this year. So go to webuildhearts.org and sign up for the dinner. You will have to register for a team when you sign up on there. So if you don't have a team, just click Team HeartWorks and you can join my team.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And super fun to be able to cook together with people all really supporting the same cause. I've got a very special link that Dr. Tim shared with me. We'll leave it down in the show notes below, which is really, am I allowed to share that link if they want to just directly donate to the Platinum fundraising team there, Tim?
Yeah, so that's the other place that we have a team, Platinum Abundance, that's also one of the teams there. And if you're part of that community, I'd encourage you to join that community. You can donate and register for the dinner under that team as well. So find your team. We've got probably 40 or 50 teams that are registered right now. Find the one that best fits for you.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, before I ask my very last question to you, you've already sent us to your website, but where do people find more about yourself and the work that you're doing out there? Is there a regular place that you either blog and post on all the new and exciting research that you do?
Yeah, so my personal place is on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn well. It's Tim Nelson, Cause to Cure, cause with the number 2 and then cure, cause to cure. And that's the place where that you'll find me. But our website, webuildhearts.org, is where all of our team efforts are highlighted and showcased.
Oh, that's awesome. And my very last question to you, Dr. Tim, and thank you for your time so far, is with everything that you've seen in the science space in your own life, what has been your best medicine?
Yeah, my best medicine has always been my family. I've in my younger years, I took it for granted. As you get older, you appreciate it more. And I'm blessed with 2 heart healthy 13 and 15-year-old boys and a beautiful wife, Danica. And the older you get and the older you watch your children grow up and be healthy, the more appreciative you are. And I think in my day job of working with congenital heart patients and seeing all the struggles and tribulations that these families go through, it only helps you develop a very deep sense of gratitude for what we all do have. And I'm more and more grateful for my family and for the health of my family is something that I didn't fully appreciate in my younger years. And the older I get, the more I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's something we all learn as we get older and wiser. Dr. Tim, I want to acknowledge you for the work that you do, for really being a key contributor in the field of exponential and regenerative medicine. Thank you for your time today, for being on the Thrive State podcast. I encourage everyone to look into the website, enjoy and participate in the February 23rd event. Dr. Tim, thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
Keep rolling, guys. It's awesome to see you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do, if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.